All right, the recording is now on, and so we're going to bless again. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, God, ruler of all, who makes us holy with commandments, commanding us to engage in sacred learning. So there's a marvelous book by Rabbi Joseph Telushkin and Joel Grishaber, who is a longtime Jewish educator, very creative Jewish educator. And the book is called Words That Heal, Words That Harm. And it's a simple read, and it's a good book. But that the power of words is so powerful in terms of how we can make people feel good and how we can do the opposite. And there's a classic story that's one of my favorites. It comes from the Hasidic tradition about a man who's feeling bad about things he said and things he didn't say. Sometimes the power is in what we say, sometimes the power is in what we don't say. And this particular man had heard some gossip. He repeated it. He wasn't certain how true it was, but it was what he heard. He repeated it, and then others repeated what he said. But when they repeated what he said, it got worse. And every time the story was repeated, someone else added something to it to make it even worse. And before you knew it, the person who was being talked about was so ostracized in the community that he had to leave. Well, this man felt horrible about it. And he went to his rabbi shortly before Yom Kippur. And as we know, on Yom Kippur, we need to make amends for things that we've done wrong. If it's a sin against God, we make amends to God. If it is a sin against one person to another, we need to approach that person. But this person couldn't be found. And so he went to his rabbi and he said, how do I clean my slate before Yom Kippur? How do I do something that can help make amends for what I've done? I've allowed this story to go too far. And the rabbi said, well, I've got a task for you. He gave him a pillow. And he said, I want you to take this pillow out into the village, rip it open, and place one of the feathers in front of every doorstep in town until the pillowcase is empty, and bring me back the empty pillowcase. He thought it was a strange task, but he figured physical labor, he's going to get himself into it. He goes out, he starts putting the feathers down on the doorposts. It's a windy day. He sees, of course, the feathers aren't staying put, but he's doing his task diligently, every feather in every place. And when he finishes, he goes back to the rabbi. He says, here's the empty pillowcase. And you know what? It was a hard job, but I realize now the error of my ways, and I feel a lot better. Thank you for giving me some kind of a task so that I could make retribution. The rabbi said, well, you're not quite done yet. Now you have to make the pillowcase whole again. Make the pillow whole, go back and collect the feathers. And he said, well, I can't. The feathers have blown all over town. And the rabbi said, so have your words. Just as the feathers cannot be put back in the pillowcase, your words cannot be taken back. Once you say them, they're out there. And so this time the man did not get retribution for his wrongdoing, but he did learn a valuable lesson. This story comes from the Hasidic tradition, and it's about what we call Lashon Hara. The Hebrew language is called Lashon HaKodesh. The word Lashon, or Lashon, means tongue. Lashon HaKodesh is the holy tongue. It's what we consider Hebrew to be the holy tongue. Lashon Hara, Ra is bad or evil. Lashon Hara is the evil tongue. And there's a couple of different places, both in Torah and in Talmud Midrash commentary, that talk specifically about this. There's a passage in the Torah. Well, first of all, there's one of the commandments, one of the 10 commandments is about this. Who knows which commandment would be about speaking badly about others? Which commandment do you think? If you don't have all 10 memorized, you don't have to know which number.
Bear false witness.
Bear false witness. Very good, Bruce. Bear false. It's like I don't even need to see who's talking. I recognize all your voices. Yes. But, do not bear false witness against your neighbor. That is specifically about lying or telling an untruth. But what about telling the truth? So there's a Leviticus 19:16 says, do not deal basely or tell tales about your countrymen. Do not profit by the blood of your fellow. I am the Lord. So part of it has to do with, are the words that you're saying have an ulterior motive? Are you trying to do something? Are you saying something against somebody because of how it will affect you? There's I'm going to consult some of my sources over here. So the Rambam, Maimonides, had an interesting take on what this particular passage does. It refers to the word Rachil, the Hebrew word Rachil, which is sometimes translated as a talebearer, someone who tells tales. And according to Maimonides, he says the Rahil, the tale tellers, is the one who gossips, going from person to person, saying, so-and-so said this, so-and-so said that, this is what I heard about so-and-so. Even though it is the truth, it ruins the world, according to Maimonides. There's still a worse sin that's included in this prohibition, named Lashon Hara, and that is, I'm quoting directly from Maimonides, and that is one who says bad things about the neighbor, even if they are telling the truth. So the gossip is the one who says it over and over again and repeats what he heard. The Lashon Hara is the one who just says bad things, even if it's the truth. And one who tells lies is called a Motzi Shem Ra, and that is someone who does slander. A Baal Lashon Hara, the master of the evil tongue, is the one who sits and says, this is what so-and-so did. And so his ancestors, well, here's what I heard about them, and says bad things about the ancestors. So here's the different categories of different sayings. What do you think about telling tales if they're the truth? What's wrong with telling the truth about somebody?
It could
Well,
be,
even if it's,
it could be that you're telling something, but leaving other things which may mitigate what you said the first time, and leaving those out.
Okay, so you've got the truth, but not the whole truth.
Mm-hmm.
In some ways.
Yeah.
Yep. Mike, what were you going to add?
I was just going to say, very often the truth can be unfairly judgmental.
Okay. The truth, right. And who has a right to judge? Okay. The truth can be unfairly judgmental.
Can't you say it in a way that isn't?
Well,
Okay.
you could.
So if you try and say the truth in a way that isn't bad, like sugarcoat, according to Torah, you're still spreading tales, because you're still spreading tales. You're still pushing it out into the world. Now I'm not saying that you have to accept all this, but the idea is that if you're telling tales about other people, the bear false witness thing is an interesting thing. I remember a Unitarian minister who was giving a talk about the Ten Commandments and posing the question to the people, what is the most difficult commandment to uphold? And he said that for him, bearing false witness was the most difficult commandment, because in his interpretation, he felt that meant that if I say, Alexander is upset about his new job, okay? I'm misrepresenting him because I'm not Alexander. That anything that I say in the name of somebody else is maybe giving information that that person didn't want to be repeated.
Called gossip.
Again, Donna?
Called gossip.
Exactly. It's gossip, and it's not my information to give. Now, this can be what is my information and what isn't. I think can be very difficult. I remember a time when my mother told some information to me about my father and his job, and I felt like, well, this isn't your information. When Dad wants me to know this, he'll tell me. And she said, well, but this is my information too, because it affects my life. And and I want to talk to my adult son about what's going on in my life. So sometimes it can be a very touchy situation as to what is my information and what am I revealing that I don't want to know, or that somebody else might not want to know. Earlier today, somebody asked Dale, "How's your mom?" Okay, well, she may or may not want people to know how she is. She's taking a nap now. Is it lashon hara? Is it evil speak to say my mother's taking a nap? None of us would think so. None of us would think that is some kind of a sinful violation. There was a rabbi's wife who was studying the master of the most well-renowned expert of ancient Jewish history of lashon hara is a man who was called the Chofetz Chaim. And if you walk by my office at the synagogue, I know Bruce has noticed this a few times and has mentioned it. There's a placard. Actually, I'm going to show it to you. I got one nearby, I think.
It's so nice to see everyone. It's good
Same
to be
here,
connected.
Bruce.
Can't see you, Bruce.
Everybody stay safe. We dropped William off in Dallas, UTD, to take to have a little summer job and live with some people there. And so now it's one less in the house, but it's nice to be around where everybody is.
Will went back to Dallas.
Yep, just taking up some time while you were off wandering.
Yeah.
Good thing you had your pants on, Rabbi.
I know. Is that backwards?
No, good.
Good.
Thank you for not speaking lashon hara.
All right.
This is. I have one in my home. I've got one in my office. Most of us are old enough to remember when you could smoke in restaurants and they had no smoking sections, and it said "Thank you for not smoking." So this is "Thank you for not speaking lashon hara," and inside it has different rules of lashon hara, as written by the Chofetz Chaim. And this Rebbitzin, the Rabbi Traxler's wife, she's Hasidic. She said, "I always get depressed reading Chofetz Chaim." I was in her bookshop buying a book of the Chofetz Chaim, and she said, "I always get depressed because if you follow all the rules of lashon hara, then you can't have any conversation. They're so strict." And in fact, Rabbi Telushkin in his book "Words That Heal, Words That Harm" says it's impossible to never do lashon hara. And what's most important is to be extremely careful about with whom and how you might say something. If you have a special relationship, one second, Donna. If you have a special relationship, a special trusting relationship with a spouse or a best friend, and that's the only person with whom you share, but you cannot, even if you say, "Please don't tell anybody," you have no control about who they might share. And so Telushkin admits that it's impossible to stay completely away from it, but you have to be really, really careful. Telushkin is also the one who would say better to keep a little bit kosher than not kosher at all. That he's the one who says try something instead of saying, well, if I can't do all the laws of kashrut, I'm not going to follow any of them. He would say do a little bit. So Donna, what are you waiting to say?
Well, this is just a little side piece. But I remember when I was working at the club, I would walk by the receptionist sometimes and I'd hear her say, "Oh no, I'm sorry, the manager isn't available right now. He went to the restroom." I mean, you know, not so appropriate to tell people where you went if it's to the restroom. But I don't know, some people just don't think anything of it. And
Today we call that TMI.
they're telling the
Too much information, more information than you need. All you needed to know was he's not available right now. Right. His the personal information isn't important, and those are the things. That's a little thing to be
they
careful.
were telling the truth.
Yeah, yeah. So, and in fact, it's in a court of law, we say the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. But sometimes the whole truth isn't necessary. You didn't need to know he's in the bathroom. You don't need to know if he's making number 1 or number 2.
Well, in the law, they say if you leave something out, that's the same as being dishonest.
Yeah. So the sin of omission is important. You're right. If you are part of a legal process, if you are, that's where the triage is. That's where you have to decide, and you take the laws and you say, okay, how much of this is important? What is important for this person to know? Is it important for her to know he's in the bathroom? That's the guy's personal information. That's not important to know. So, but it is interesting to think about. You have to decide what's important. If this piece of information, and in fact, the only exception for Lashon Hara is if you are preventing somebody from harm. If you know somebody who is going to get married and you happen to know that that person has a romantic relationship with somebody else that's ongoing, and they could come to harm in their marriage if they don't have that information. But you better have your facts straight. You can't just repeat what somebody else heard, because that might not be the whole truth.
That's a bad situation to be in.
Of course. Well,
You better have seen it firsthand.
yeah. Or if you're going into, or experienced it. If you're going into business with somebody who, if you know that somebody has cheated in business before, how do you know that? Have they been convicted of a crime? Were you the victim of their cheating? Do you know it absolutely firsthand? And you're going to give them advice that's going to prevent them from losing their shirt? That's an important time to give information, to give truthful information. But to just say, well, I think he's a bad businessman, that's, how factual is that? And it's just about being careful. Yeah, Donna?
So it's safe to say that when you relay information to people, you need to know what you're talking about and get it firsthand, not through the telephone line.
Right.
But
Telephone line. Yeah.
my question is, what about learning how to be more sensitive and thoughtful when you talk to people?
Okay.
If you're sharing pertinent and information with them, what about, there's a way to say something, there's a way to say something.
Yes.
So
this comes up in a Talmudic discussion. I'm giving you classic Jewish teachings, and then we're applying it to real life. But this comes up in a discussion about the truth between Hillel and Shammai. Hillel and Shammai often have disagreements, and that we're taught that on your on the wedding day, you're supposed to say, "What a wise and beautiful and pious bride." Okay, and somebody asked, "So, what if she's ugly and stupid?" You know, what do you say? Are you supposed to tell the truth?
Well, beauty
And
is only skin deep.
You don't go to the wedding.
neither of those are part of the teaching. Okay? The Shammai says, if that's the case, then what you say is, "What a bride." But Hillel said, you still say, "What a wise and beautiful bride." Because it's her wedding day and she's beautiful whether you see it or not. So there's a case where Rabbi Hillel, in his wisdom, is sort of recommending that you don't give the whole truth because it could be hurtful. How many times do we hear somebody say, "Now don't get me wrong, or I'm only telling you this for your own good." And you know that right after that is going to be something hurtful. And so it's that kind of a private conversation that depends on your relationship with each other. But here's another, let me see if I can find this here. Okay.
Dan,
Yes, go ahead, Leslie.
I have a
I got you. There you go.
Can you hear
All
me
right.
now?
Yeah, go ahead.
At one time, you have spoken in the past about somebody who's sick in the hospital and talking about the truth and not saying anything bad, but maybe not giving the whole truth to the person that's in the hospital sick. Perhaps they may not recover, maybe it will take time, etc. Will you expand upon that issue, especially during this time?
Yeah,
When
you're right. So it's a very sensitive issue because people have a right to their privacy, and so in order to and especially in my role as a chaplain, there's rules that you're not allowed to say anything about anybody when you are visiting somebody as a chaplain, because that's their private information. And there's HIPAA laws and things like that. A person has a right to their privacy. And so if a patient were to say, "I'd like you to please update Ellen about my condition," then they've given permission. And if they haven't, then it's their private information. And so even though somebody might be very concerned about somebody's condition, it's not up to us as individuals to spread information unless we have the permission of the person about whom the information is.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it's difficult because that the person who's asking is just asking out of caring, and so it becomes a very, very difficult balance about how to balance the caring nature of the person who's looking for information and the privacy of the person about whom the information is. And we all make mistakes. We all sometimes say something that we shouldn't have said, or don't say something that we should have said. And that's why we've got we've got the rules, but we all have to interpret the rules for the best case of the situation. A lot of times, there is for some cases there's a stigma about certain things like mental illness. Sometimes there's a stigma about more so in ancient times than now, but a stigma about someone who takes their own life. That's a very private thing, and sometimes the people who are the closest loved ones don't want people to know that or think about their loved one in that way. There's a midrash that says if a person involves himself in lashon hara, he makes himself worthy of death, as lashon hara is as serious as murder. For one who murders takes one life, while the bearer of lashon hara kills three: the one who says it, the one who listens, and the one about whom it is said. And this is a very powerful, serious teaching that is basically saying that you can destroy somebody's character. You can destroy somebody else's impression of that person. And it's like you've killed their identity. And you've harmed the person you're talking about, yourself, and the person who's hearing it. It's a very, very serious statement.
Rabbi, can you hear me, Rabbi?
Yeah, go ahead, Roger.
I'm sorry, I gotta go cook. I forgot. Thank you so much. I'm leaving, thank you.
Oh, you're just saying goodbye?
Yeah, because I gotta go cook.
Oh, I thought you were going to give us some wisdom.
No.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So now we can talk, now that you're leaving, we can talk about you. Oh, no, of course not.
Yeah, I give you permission.
No.
Hey, Roger.
We might get
Hello.
Hey, Roger.
Yes, sir.
Before you go, hello.
Hello, how are you? You look great. Thank you. Goodbye. Shalom, shalom.
Bye-bye.
It sounds like the old Beatles song, Mike. I don't know why you say goodbye. I say hello.
Right, exactly. There you go.
Yeah.
Way to go, Jack.
Well,
Or with your new beard, the Dylan lyric. I was so much older then, I'm younger than that now.
Yep. Times they were changing.
Yeah. So there are times when the Torah and the Midrash and Talmud will give a very, very serious, powerful consequence that may feel like it's going overboard, just to make us super duper careful. So the thing about lashon hara being like murder is one of those instances where they're presenting it in the most serious fashion so that we understand that it's not light. Speaking ill about somebody else is not light. Thoughts about that murder piece, that it's akin to murder, and the three people that it.
It's a little extreme, Dan.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, that is extreme.
Yeah, of course. It's to let us know how serious it is. I remember an instance where, and even
That could be very damaging, though, like slanderous comments, and
absolutely,
that could ruin careers and reputations forever. I mean, families, marriages, just
absolutely, and so it could ruin somebody's life. Okay, I mean, when you look at what is justice, okay. Justice is very difficult. I read about a situation that happened not long ago, and it was in Texas. I think it was in Carrollton, where some kids were playing Ding Dong Dash. Okay, wherever you grew up, it was probably a game that might have had a different name, but it's where you run up to a house, you push a doorbell, and you run away. Okay, and it's just a prank. So these kids were out pranking. They rang somebody's doorbell. They ran back into their car, and as they were driving away, the owner of the house came out, got in his car, and chased the kids down. They got into a high-speed chase, and the kids ran into a tree. And 3 of the 6 kids in the car died. Did anybody else read about this case?
Yeah.
No.
No.
What do you think about what happened there? These kids did something really, really, really stupid. It doesn't warrant the death penalty,
No.
but it happened. They died because they did a stupid prank.
Mhm.
People do stupid things all the time that have a more severe consequence than it should. Driving too fast on the freeway is not worthy of the death penalty, but you could commit accidental murder. You could accidentally kill yourself. And so that's why this midrash about lashon hara being like murder, it's not saying that you should be put to death in a court of law. It's saying that you should be aware that your words have more power than you might think. Yeah, it is extreme. It is extreme. And it doesn't say that you need to be stoned to death if you commit lashon hara. But it's saying it's really bad. It's a tough one. It's a tough one. And again, it's not. So there was the example of there's the example in Torah of Miriam and Aaron gossiping about Moses' wife. They didn't like Moses' wife. He married outside the faith. He married a Cushite woman, which is often thought of as meaning a dark-complected woman from the Midian tribe, and they were gossiping, and they were saying, why does Moses get so much respect from God? God talks to us too, and here he is. He's going off and marrying a Cushite woman. And according to the Torah, Miriam gets afflicted with leprosy because of that speech. And Moses pleads to God to heal her. And she gets healed after 7 days. This is a story in Torah. That here she, and it's a classic story about gossip, but it's also a classic story about forgiveness. That Moses was the one being gossiped about, and Moses was the one who said, "Please heal her." And so maybe it's maybe the lesson of that story is that the person who's most wronged is the one who has the power to forgive. Donna?
So maybe the lesson in the Ding Dong Dash is to take responsibility and not run away.
Yeah, but what about the guy who chased them down?
Right.
The guy who what?
Chased them.
The adult that should
There's a
know
lot
better.
of different aspects to this thing. You know, you can't really say that it actually happened because of ringing the bell. It happened because they were speeding and they lost control of the car. So there's different ways of looking at it. So, of course, if the guy wasn't chasing them, would they be speeding? But then if they didn't go and ring the doorbell,
They wouldn't have gotten chased.
you know, so if you're,
Everybody,
if you're looking to blame something or someone, I don't know if there's just one thing to blame. You can.
and that is what is so often the case. Everybody was wrong. The kids
Yes.
were wrong for ringing the bell. The guy was wrong for reacting in a violent way. And everybody was wrong. So these children lost their lives. This man is going to be charged with a crime. And I believe he's being charged. I think he's being charged with murder.
See, but
Yeah.
when we call it wrong, we're making you know, we're saying
A judgment.
yeah, we're making a judgment here, and is that okay? I mean, we try to say, well, there is no right or wrong, there is no good or bad, and judgment is not good. We shouldn't judge people. So why judge the kids for doing what they're doing, what they did, because they were kids, and kids do that. I think I did that when I was a kid.
Most of us probably did.
You know,
But the Torah doesn't. The Torah never says there's no right or wrong. It does talk to us. It does talk to us about not being judgmental, but there are laws and there are judges.
Yeah.
And in fact, in the even in the not even, but in the non-Jewish world, according to Torah, there are 7 laws that make the Gentiles as worthy of 100% as the Jews who fulfill obligations. And they're called the Noahide laws. And one of those is establishing courts of justice, making sure that people are accountable for wrongdoing. So judgment is supposed to exist, but the judgment of character, I think, is more what the laws of Lashon Hara are talking about than legal.
that's where I was referring to the right or wrong, is that it's in a court of law. Of course, there's right or wrong. In the Torah, it's right or wrong. But in life, it's what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. Instead of judging, for me to say what you did is wrong, well, who am I to say what you did is wrong? You know, and who am I to say what you did was right? Because it may not be right according to somebody else. And so, again, going back to being more sensitive when you talk to people and using words that are a little more thoughtful rather than bludgeoning them or coming down on them so hard that they don't ever want to talk to anybody again. Just being thoughtful. But I'm sorry, I'm taking away from.
It's okay. We're going to come back to that, Jeff.
Well, we spent over 45 minutes talking about the power of spoken word, and the only thing we've talked about are the bad things. How about words that inspire, words that comfort, words that encourage? Why don't we
Nice.
include that in the spectrum?
Beautiful. Beautiful. You know what? How is it that the texts that I have picked out were only about the bad when that seems so contrary to my own feeling? that we want our words to be uplifting. Now there is an interesting there is an interesting teaching that comes from a more modern rabbi whose name is Jill Hammer, who talks specifically about the intimacy of gossip, that sometimes that this is what brings people together, not necessarily about speaking badly about other people, but about how it strengthens bonds. But your point, Jeffrey, is so excellent about, and I guess that when I read the Torah, sometimes I see that the punishments for wrongdoing seem to be worse than the rewards for right doing. If you follow what I'm saying, that if we follow the commandments, that it's going to rain at the right time, and if we don't, we're going to get boils and leprosy and herpes and all kinds of mean, nasty, ugly things. And I think that there's warnings in the Torah, but the exaltation, and I think that's what's more personal. How often do we hear something that somebody says that just plain makes our day, brings us up from the doldrums? And how easy is it for us to notice what's wrong, and how do we as often, if we're going to be really careful about not saying the wrong thing, how careful can we be to be proactive and say the right thing? I think that's an excellent point. It's less mentioned in our Jewish teachings. I think that's a fascinating thing that I hadn't thought about till you brought it up.
Well, is the inherent assumption that people's normal inclination is to do the right thing.
Yeah, I think the Torah's perspective is the opposite. The people's normal inclination is
Doesn't
to...
sound like that.
And Lacey?
Sounds like, it doesn't sound like that. It sounds like it's really negative and it's all about consequences. And when you do something wrong, this is what's going to happen, and you're going to be punished. And there's not a whole lot of focus.
We are more warned about doing the wrong thing than we are praised for doing the right thing. And yet, some of the narratives in the Torah that, and I guess it depends on what you choose to study. If you look at, for instance, the book of Ruth. In the book of Ruth, you have a young woman who is following with her mother-in-law. They're both widows, and the mother-in-law, Naomi, says to two daughters-in-law, all three of us are widows. You go back and find new husbands and don't worry about me. And one of them says, thank you very much, and she leaves and goes back home. The other says, don't ask me to leave you. Your people are my people. Your God is my God. Where you live, I shall live. Where you'll die, I shall die. This is Ruth. And Ruth, through a series of kindnesses to her mother-in-law, ends up being the great-great-grandmother of King David. And the house of David is supposed to be the house of the Messiah. And so perhaps it takes longer for the story of doing what's right versus the prohibition. This is something to think about seriously, because we need to have those teachings. that promote and encourage going overboard in or not overboard, but being vigilant and actively looking to build up people's spirits. Even in the golden rule that almost every religion has, our version of it, from Rabbi Hillel, says, what is hateful to another, what is hateful to yourself, do not do to your fellow. And it's in the negative. And we are much more encouraged to not do the wrong thing than we are encouraged to do something nice and active. And that's
Say that again. Would you repeat that?
our teachings are more focused on discouraging us from doing what's wrong than they are encouraging us from actively, we're told to follow the commandments, but to actively push doing the right thing. We're commanded, honor your mother and father.
Isn't it the same thing? If you're taught not to do wrong, that's so you could do right.
It is, but what Jeff is suggesting is that let's put a stronger emphasis, and I'll refer back to Words That Heal, Words That Harm, the book by Telushkin and Grishaver, that there's those opposites. And to look for the healing words, to look for the encouragement. As often as we're going to send a sympathy card or a get well card, to just send a card to somebody to say, hey, you're special in my life. Go ahead, Donna.
I agree with Jeff. And that's what I was getting at earlier when I said there's a way to say something and there's a way to say something, and that to use more appropriate language, more positive words. I mean, the Torah is a teaching tool. And I guess, religion kind of teaches through a little bit of fear, a little bit of, a lot of fear maybe, but.
It's like parenting,
Well, and yes, and in parenting,
praise, you're supposed to give a child a lot of praise, more so than constant negative.
Words are very important.
Right.
Yeah.
And we've got the concepts of positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. Don't do what's wrong and encourage people to do what's right. And perhaps that the Torah focuses on the prohibitions. And, Jeff was hinting maybe the natural inclination is to do the right thing. Whether or not that's a natural inclination, that we have to learn from example. We have to see the people who are building up others, who are giving compliments, who are praising, who are making people feel good, and experience how that feels for us to be able to give it to others.
At the end of the day, it's all about balance. I mean, one does not write a law unless you need the law because somebody's breaking it and doing the right thing. So by nature, if you write a law, it's to right a wrong or to prevent a wrong. And that would tend to be a negative approach. But yet 99% of the people obey the law or didn't need the law in the first place. It's all about balance.
So when we have a law that says, do not place stumbling blocks in front of the blind.
It's not for 99% of the people who would not place stumbling blocks in front of the blind.
Right.
It's for the 1% of the people who need to be encouraged not to do the wrong thing.
But implicit becomes the hint of take the blind person and help them along.
Sure.
To do more than not doing the wrong thing.
Sure.
Yeah, it takes a conscious effort. It takes a conscious effort for sure.
No, I tend to agree with Jeff, actually. I think most of us innately do the right thing. I think when you need a conscious effort is when you're inclined to do the wrong thing.
Well, and all of us do things that we don't know is hurtful when we're doing it. All of us make that mistake. We say something that we don't understand is hurtful, and it becomes our own responsibility to be able to say to somebody, that was a hurtful thing you said. To educate each other, as Donna has said a few times, in kind ways. That sometimes we might say something that our intention was not hurtful, and it became hurtful. I've had situations. Well, doesn't matter what the specifics are. We all have the opportunity to make a mistake, and we all have the opportunity to correct one and to help somebody else in that process. I have definitely had people who have pointed out something to me that I said that I thought was nice and good-natured. They took it differently, and I would never have known unless they told me, because it seemed like a very, very natural thing and a nice thing, and that was my intention, but it felt differently to them and they heard it differently. That's the other thing to remember, is that what we say is different than what somebody hears.
It's not always the subject too, it's the delivery.
Often.
A lot of times you say words, a corollary to what you're saying, you say words that you're just thinking and you don't realize how, in a positive way, how those words affect people. I had a girlfriend from high school. She was just my friend, and we would talk, and decades later she came back and said, I grew up in a dysfunctional household. You probably didn't know that, but your words and your actions were so important to me. So it goes both ways.
And that, her pointing that out to you,
Mm-hmm.
sounds like it was very, very uplifting for you.
Oh, I was clueless.
Yeah.
I was just being me. And so the other thing I was going to say was, for some people it's easier. I think for the most part, I'm a pretty optimistic person. I try and say nice and kind things. If I hurt people, which I have done, it's like you said, was not ever meant to be done on purpose. But for some people have to consciously work at it. I think for some people it's a little bit more natural. And I was just being me and had not a clue how much my words, it's important what you say and how you say it, as Donna said, because you don't ever know how those words are going to affect people, positive or negative.
Yeah. Very few of us you set out trying to hurt somebody's feelings.
Right.
Well, especially when you're in a group of people and someone calls you on something in a very unkind way. It's really hurtful.
Sure.
So
most people think that they don't realize what they're doing. They really don't. I don't think they mean to be hurting you, but it comes out that way.
So there are 9 people in this Zoom room right now, and I want to say that each of you have at one time or another said something that made me feel good. So I thank you for that. And if y'all have ideas for particular topics that you'd like to engage in the future, let me know. We've got some things in the works for an Israeli speaker who's going to present something in the near future. There's a minister that he and I are planning on doing a dialogue when we figure out the technology, but might be as early as next week. We've got a concert this Sunday for honoring education. That's going to be at 1 o'clock on Sunday with Cantor Vadim and Yana. And also this Friday's Shabbat service, Cantor Tunitsky's mother passed away on Saturday at the age of 98. And he's going to dedicate this Friday service to honoring her and other mothers. And so we've got a lot coming up and hope to see you there.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Shalom.
Rabbi.
Have a good
Shalom.
afternoon. Lacey, I'll see
Shalom.
you at 4. Yeah.
Okay.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.